We've been worried that Donald Trump, fearing that he might not be able to win later on this year, might start talking about voter fraud more, coming up with insane ideas of what would be examples of that, talking about potentially delaying or canceling the election, or messing with the ability of the federal government and state governments to set up an election where people could vote and not be exposed to coronavirus. And we are slowly walking down several of those roads. Here's a couple of tweets that the president sent out earlier today. Donald Trump, breaking. Michigan sends absentee ballots to 7.7 million people ahead of primaries and the general election. This was done illegally and without authorization by a rogue Secretary of State. I will ask to hold up funding to Michigan if they want to go down this voter fraud path. So we're going to return to a couple of those points in just a second, but understand this is not just about Michigan. He also said, state of Nevada thinks that they can send out illegal vote-by-mail ballots, creating a great voter fraud scenario. Wait, is it great? You don't think it's great. Why would you write great? For the state in the U.S., they can't. If they do, I think I can hold up funds to the state. Sorry, but you must not cheat in elections. So, JR, what he's saying there is, if you send out ballots to allow people to vote absentee or to vote by mail, that is inherently voter fraud, even though we should acknowledge that in the case of Michigan, he's not only a complete fraud, he also doesn't know what he's talking about. They did not send 7.7 million people ballots. They sent out applications so that they can apply, because the Secretary of State has a responsibility to make sure that people can vote even during a pandemic. But anyway, what do you think about this broadside against absentee ballots, mail-in ballots? It doesn't seem like a coincidence that he's talking about multiple states at the same time.
Yeah, we'll get to, I think, another story later about more of the dismantling of the parameters of our government when it comes to like our judicial system. But here, if you want to make sure you win more elections, you have to dismantle the voting system altogether if your party is not the popular party. The majority of the country doesn't agree with your party and sees your party as the problem. You have to find a way to eliminate those people. And then this is age old. We know how this works, but it has to evolve with the times. And so now, under a wannabe dictator, you have to make sure you dismantle every aspect of it. So now voting by mail is now fraud. We already seen that happen. And also registration for voting is also now fraud. Or, I mean, it's ballots and not registration. You have to change the terminology of what is to something completely different, just so you can say that voting, eventually we'll get to voting in America is illegal. Voting in America is fraudulent. If you vote, you're actually not being very democratic. We're flipping reality on its head, and it sounds ridiculous, right? Think about the 27 to 50 other things that this guy has said that flip reality on its head, and we go, no one's really going to believe that, are they? And we move on, but then people believe it and glom onto it, and then that continues to get perpetuated to where now voting is a problem. In America, voting is not legal. It's not right. If you do it in the ways that it's always been done, then you're fraud.
I mean, you want a perfect example of that flipping reality? I mean, do you remember, what was it, 3 or 4 weeks ago? Press conference with Donald Trump, who's like, mail voting is a fraud. It shouldn't be allowed. Reporter, sir, didn't you vote by mail? Well, yeah, because I can.
Because that's me.
Well,
straight up.
Exactly.
Basically, the answer was because I did it, and I'm not there. So if I vote by mail, that's perfectly fine. Everyone else, you guys are criminals.
Yeah. 100%. And so while this is going on, understand he's attacking Michigan there and Nevada. When it comes to Michigan, the fact that he's saying you need to not do this, don't allow people to vote, or we'll take money away from you. I think that there's a very specific reason why he's making that particular threat today, and that is because Michigan is facing a significant threat from these dam failures. You might have seen news over the past day or two about that. Many people having to be evacuated. There is talk about, this is a quote from Governor Gretchen Whitmer, said in the next 12 to 15 hours, downtown Midland could be under approximately 9 feet of water. We are anticipating an historic high water level. And so obviously that's a significant problem. They're probably going to need help. Some of that help might need to come from the federal government. And now is when he decides to put pressure to have them stop people from voting, when theoretically people's property, buildings, businesses, and even lives are at risk.
Kind of reminiscent of when he attacks anything else that happens with a disaster in a state, to make sure that he says, hey, by the way, I'm going to cut something off, or threatens to do so. With California wildfires, Puerto Rico, hurricanes. It continues to happen. If he doesn't like the people that are leading a certain state or territory, then you have to make sure that you threaten them when something natural happens to the area and to the people. So it's seen as an opportunity rather than a chance to actually help American people. So his position is not has become. It always has been an opportunity to propel himself at the expense of Americans.
Oh, you know what? Let's fit in a response, by the way, from he referenced the Secretary of State of Michigan. She tweeted in response to this saying, "Hi, I also have a name. It's Jocelyn Benson, and we sent applications, not ballots, just like my GOP colleagues in Iowa, Georgia, Nebraska, and West Virginia. And I am glad that she is doing the thankless and honestly pointless task of pointing out the lies and hypocrisy, just as we did with his vote. It doesn't matter." Like you pointed out, because it feels like, well, wouldn't you want to be consistent and factual? But they don't. Yeah, he is okay with red states doing that. He's not okay with blue states doing that, purely based on who is likely to vote as a result of it. Especially Michigan is one of the key states that he desperately needs to win in the election. He wants, if he could have one person vote and have it be a Republican billionaire, he'd press the button on that plan in a second. He doesn't want people voting. It is an open, outright declared war on democracy. That's what it is. They're not having to hide it. They barely ever have, but they're certainly not now. They want fewer people to vote, and they will stop them with any means possible.
If you really think his support of those Michigan protesters that are protesting lockdown guidelines, if you think that had anything to do with their freedoms and their desire to get back to work, you're losing your mind. He's like, oh, Michigan, that makes sense. Maybe that can help me. I see an opportunity here. Let me see if I can rile up people further and make them think that anyone who's on the opposite side of the aisle is against them. And it's for me, this will help my reelection chances. So everyone who's getting used by him on this, remember, he's encouraging you to jump out in the streets and protest and do all this and tell these lies and push his narratives just so he can get reelected. It has nothing to do with you. And I don't know how many more times it can be said, because he's already discredited anyone who disagrees with him as just crazies or never Trumpers. Even if they're Republicans, they must be hateful. All these things that are put together that you have to buy in order to continue to support him. I hope the number shrinks, but
yeah,
it appears to not.
And isn't it amazing? Like, you have 2% of the country that is sure that the greatest threat to liberties that's ever been created in the history of man is being asked politely to wear a mask before you shop at a nice grocery store. They're protesting about their rights being taken away by the fact that, you know, they're not allowed to willfully spread a fatal disease. While this has been going on, like, bills passed allowing Bill Barr to look at your search history without a warrant if he wants, among a variety of other privacy infringements that have been passed. The only legislative priority that Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell have right now when it comes to the coronavirus is taking away your ability to sue your employer if your employer sets up a dangerous environment and you get coronavirus and potentially someone around you dies as a result of it. They stripped you of that right. Like your right to vote, hypothetically, in a democracy, which seems important. If you're going to uphold your rights in other areas, you kind of need to be able to choose representatives and things like that. They're getting rid of that. So there are actual threats to rights going on, but these people are not interested in any of that. They don't give a damn about it. They don't want to have to wear a mask. They want to be able to go to the gym. Or honestly not. A lot of the people in those crowds, I don't think that they're actively going to gyms. They just want to be mad and they want to feel like victims.
Yeah, or go to the hair salon and you see the way these folks look, you're like, trust. It hasn't only been a month or two since you've had your hair done. Sorry.
Okay, Pelosi. Jesus.
I'm hair shaming, not fat shaming.
That's true. I think that's still acceptable. And by the way, so this is a story that I know we're going to be talking about later on today, I believe, on the main show. But in terms of, again, the efforts that are undergoing to make sure that if we have an election in November, that it is not a substantive election. Just bear in mind, it's not just the mail voting, the absentee ballot, all of that. It's, you got Georgia canceling an election for a state Supreme Court seat, which apparently they believe he can legally do, canceled it, and now they hold that seat for 2 more years. He gets to appoint someone. He's going to appoint a right-wing whack job, and for 2 more years, they're going to have that. And isn't it nice to have control almost unilateral control. Brian Kemp, a guy who already interfered with the last election in Georgia, that he's now going to have an even more sympathetic state Supreme Court. So Georgia, a state that is looking like it might be tight in November, if he wants to, strip away polling places or do other stuff, that gets challenged. Where does it go to? State Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
Which is his. It's a convenient setup if you can get it.
Yeah, we've seen how Mitch McConnell wants to make sure he controls the courts for generations to come. When he's long gone, he wants to make sure that his legacy of hatred and bias is sitting within America's courts, which will help destroy the country. It's the same thing. They know where the levers are to make sure that they're given free rein to do the things that they want to do. And there's just another level of it. It has to have coordination also with the retiring state Supreme Court justice in Georgia that said, "Hey, I'm going to resign, and my end date is now before the end of the year," to make sure that this part of the law can be put into place to allow Governor Kemp to do this. It all has to be coordinated. It's not a coincidence. We know it's like there's too many coincidences where they get exactly what they want based off people that are in the same party.
Yeah,
come on, man.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.